this lesson is going to be again on the calculator reference sheet for the GED. This is going to be the portion on powers and roots. So we're going to take a look at that today. Powers and roots. One of the first things we have to kind of pick up on is a little bit of this, what we call the hokey pokey stuff here. You know, a lot of math has this yin and yang, forwards and backwards. Remember, adding and subtracting relate to each other. They're kind of what we call, in math we call them inverse operations, but they kind of undo each other. Multiplying and dividing are also what we call inverse operations. So in math, when you're taught things, you're going to learn how to put something together, and then you're going to inversely learn how to take stuff back apart. That's kind of one of the main things of a lot of math, is those two things. So remember, when you add 9 plus 1 is 10, inversely, I'm allowed to go backwards, if you will, and I can make a subtraction problem and say, start here with 10 and go 10 minus 1 gives me 9. I should get a true statement. So for every true addition statement, there's going to be a backward statement for subtraction. Similarly, if you make a subtraction statement, you can go the other direction. So for instance, I could say 10 minus 1 is 9, and inversely, I could start the 9 and say 9 plus 1 takes me back to 10. So that's very powerful in math. In multiplication, 6 times 5 is 30. I'm also allowed to go backwards inversely, and I can make a division statement. So when you go backwards, you have to think opposite. So the opposite direction tells me now to use division. So divide. So 30 divided by 5 is going to give you back to the 6. So 30 divided by 5 takes you back to the 6. So a math problem can be read two directions. In one direction, it's a true multiplication problem. But if you read it backwards, you have to use its opposite operation. You actually have to say 30 divided by 5 is 6. So I can do that. And again, a lot of times I go, if it's 30 divided by 5 is 6, then you can check it by going backwards, because the opposite division is actually multiplication. So if 30 divided by 5 is 6, I can go inversely and say 6 times 5 has to get me back to 30. If 6 times 5 doesn't get me back to 30, then there's something wrong with our math. It has to work both directions. So when it comes to powers and roots, these guys are what we refer to as inverse operations. So when I see 5 to the power 2, this 5 is referred to as the base. The 2 is referred to as the exponent. And a lot of times they'll use the word power for that. So when we look at this, this is 5 to the power of 2. 5 to the power of 2. Most commonly we say 5 squared. And what 5 squared means is, it means 5 times 5, which is going to be 25. So that exponent tells me how many times to multiply the base to itself. So since there's a power 2, that means to write down 2 5s and multiply those 2 5s together. And that will give us the result of 25. Now, instead of saying square, inversely we have what's referred to as the square root symbol. So this symbol is referred to as the square root. So if we see that, it almost looks like a division symbol, but it's not. It's got this extra little thing on the front of it, which makes it a square root symbol. So, in math, if I read this, 5 squared, as we said, 5 times 5 would be 25. So 5 squared, 5 times 5 is 25. Inversely, and what inversely means is start with the 25 and go backwards. But if I go backwards, I have to use the inverse operation. And the inverse operation of squaring is actually referred to as the square root. So I can take the square root of 25. In doing so, the square root of 25, what it's saying is, what did you actually square to get that 25? So if I go backwards, what we squared was this 5. 5 was squared that gave me 25. So the square root of 25 is going to be then 5. So if I have 8 squared 8 squared means 8 times 8. 8 times 8 is going to be 64. Inversely, I can go backwards. So inversely, I can start with 64. But if I go backwards, I have to use the inverse operation of squaring. And we refer to that as the square root symbol. So I can take the square root of 64. And the square root of 64, what it's saying is what did you actually square to get 64? Well, 8 was squared, that gave me 64. 8 was squared, that gave me 64. So the root number that I squared to get 64 is the 8. So a lot of times we use this word root. Root kind of means origin, okay? The beginning. We start with an 8. Now, on the calculator, we have a special key referred to as the square button. X square button. So that's our shortcut key, is that. Okay? That's our shortcut, is the x squared. So if I want to use our calculator, I can square rather easily by finding the x squared button. The x squared button is just to the left of the 7. That's where it's located at. So to type in 8 squared, what I do is I type in, got to turn the calculator on, clear it off a little bit. Looks like I have to do a memory clear, so on, hold clear, memory cleared. So what I can do is type the 8 in, and then hit the x squared button. So how we would actually type it in the calculator is, we kind of type the 8 in, and then we find that x squared button. So if we do that, I find the 8. Again, the x squared is just to the left of the 7. Hit that, and also it puts a little power of 2 up there. Hit enter, and it'll give me my 64. So if I hit the enter button, that kicks out the answer of 64. So I can square rather easily by using the x squared button. 5 squared the same way. I can find the 5, hit the x squared button, that has 5 squared on it, hit enter, and that'll give me my 25. Now, another thing we got going on in math is we have this power of 3. You may come across that a little bit as well. So 2 to the power of 3, a lot of times we refer to this as 2 cubed. So if you see that word cubed, that means that the exponent was a 3. And 2 cubed means 2 times 2 times 2. So that 3 means to multiply 2 by itself 3 times. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8. So a lot of people want to say 6, but 6 is 2 plus 2 plus 2. We need 2 times 2 times 2. That's the wrong way. The right way is 2 times 2 times 2. And that would give us actually an 8. So what we pick up on is 2 cubed is 8. Inversely, I can take the cube root of 8. So the cube root would be what this is. So this is referred to as our cube root symbol here. So when you have that little 3 there, this no longer is a square root. This is called a cube root. So what I have is the 2 cubed is 8. And since 2 cubed is 8, inversely I go backwards and do the inverse operation of cubing, and that's where this cube root comes into play. So I'm going to be taking the cube root of 8. And the cube root of 8 basically means, what did I cube that gave me 8? So the cube root of 8 would take me back to the 2. So cube root of 8 would equal then, that would equal then a 2. Now if I want to use the calculator, where do we find that cube root on the calculator? This gets a little tricky. See if I can walk you through this. To do cube root, we have this little, the rooftop key. This little rooftop key, that's right above the x squared key. And right above that rooftop key in green, we have this key that looks like this. It has x and then has what we actually call this just the radical symbol, but a lot of times you call it the square root symbol, but it's actually called the radical symbol when it's different. So it's got this x, and then we have this radical symbol. So if you hear that word radical, it has something to do with these crazy looking division symbols. So to do that though, I actually got to enter the 3 first into the calculator. 3 goes in first, and then I need to go to that X radical key. And to do that, since it's in green, I have to hit the second button, and then I hit the X radical button. And then I'm allowed to put, since we're doing 8, we put the 8 in there. And then I have to use the right arrow to get out of there, and then hit enter, and that would give me my 2. So I can do the cube root of 8 on the calculator, and that would give me my, my answer of 2. Similarly, we can do 5 cubed. 5 cubed on the calculator, 5 cubed is going to be 5 times 5 times 5. Or again, if I want on the calculator, I can go 5, and if I hit this housetop key, what that actually does is it moves my cursor up into the exponent area. So that little rooftop key that's right above the x squared, if I hit that, it actually moves the cursor up. Now it's waiting for me to put a 3 in there. Hit the 3, 5 times 5 is 25, and 25 times 5 would be 25, 50, 75, 100, 125. Or if I just hit the enter button, it'll give me my 125. So 5 cubed is actually 125. Inversely, what I can do is go backwards. And if I go backwards, inversely means you have to start with the 125. But the inverse of cubing is actually the cube root. So that's why we have this right here. And we want to take the cube root of 125. And to do that, since we've already done our math, we already know that 5 cubed is 125. So the cube root of 125 should be this 5. Now, to use the calculator, clear this all out here. I keep bumping buttons there. To do the cube root again, that's when you got to use this X radical key. And to do that, I have to first though type the 3 in. That's going to be what the X actually is. And then I can do the second button and hit that X radical key, and that'll give me my cube root of. And then I'm allowed to put the 125 in. So if I put that 125 in, hit enter, 125, and hit, well, we can get out with the radical 2. So I hit the right arrow, and that'll get me out of there. And that'll be 5. So the answer there would be 5. So that would be our final answer. So, just to recap then, powers and roots, again, those are inverse operations. So if we have squaring, we have what we call the square root. If I have cubing, then we have what's called the cube root. They kind of work each other back and forth. So that's their own little, what we call the hokey pokey. They kind of undo each other there, if you will. Alrighty, one more lesson.